Welcome to this explainer. Okay, if you've ever taken a biology class, you probably have this etched into your brain, the classic Punnett square, right? Well, today, we're tossing that basic framework out the window, or at least we're moving way past it. We're diving headfirst into the messy, chaotic, and completely fascinating molecular reality of how inheritance actually works.
Because, look, we all learned Gregor Mendel's rules. You know the drill. Dominant alleles perfectly mask recessive ones. It's super neat, it's totally predictable, and honestly, it's almost never the whole story. So what actually happens inside our cells when those neat, predictable ratios just completely break down? Well, that is exactly what we're going to uncover today.
Here's our roadmap for the explainer. 1. The limits of Mendel. 2. Incomplete dominance and haploinsufficiency. 3. Epistasis, or the Biochemical Roadblock. 4. Polygenic Inheritance and the bell curve. And finally, number 5, the environmental factor. Let's get right into it.
Starting off with Section 1, the limits of Mendel, looking beyond basic dominant and recessive rules.
So Mendel gave us a really fantastic foundation. Dominant alleles mask recessive ones, traits sort independently, it's genetics 101. But as we push past those basic squares on a chalkboard, we hit a molecular reality that is way more complex than just capital and lowercase letters. Inside your cells, complex chemical interactions are constantly breaking Mendel's golden rules. Which brings us to Section 2, incomplete dominance and haploinsufficiency. Basically, what happens when one gene just isn't enough? You've probably seen the classic example of a red flower and a white flower mixing to make a pink flower. But why does that actually happen? Enter this master-level concept called haploinsufficiency. Remember, an allele isn't just a letter, right? It's a literal, physical instruction manual for your cells to build a protein. In this case, having just one functional red allele simply doesn't produce a high enough dosage of the enzyme needed to push that flower's color all the way to red. And here is the absolutely crucial point. Because the cell only has half the required protein dosage, it literally stalls out. It gets stuck at a biochemical halfway point. So that pink flower you're seeing, that is actually a chemical blending, not a genetic one. The underlying DNA didn't merge together like paint. The cellular production line just ran out of steam. Moving right along to Section 3, Epistasis, the biochemical roadblock, where totally different genes get masked. Mendel kind of treated every trait like it was acting totally solo. But in reality, traits are built on these massive interconnected biochemical pathways. Epistasis acts like a giant roadblock in your body, where one single gene completely overrides and masks the expression of a completely different gene. And a perfect real-world example of this? Human blood types and something called the Bombay Phenotype. Okay, think of human blood typing like an assembly line in a factory. Step 1 has to build the base frame before Step 2 can actually paint it. Specifically, your body first needs this base structure called the H antigen, and that is built by the FUT1 gene. Got it? Only after that base is completely built can your body step in and attach those specific type A or type B blood markers. But what happens if that base frame never actually gets built? Well, if you happen to inherit 2 mutated, non-working copies of that FUT1 gene, the entire assembly line just grinds to a halt. It stops. So even if you inherited the specific genes for type A or type B blood, you literally cannot attach those markers. The base structure is missing. Because of that, you will test as blood type O, and your true type A or type B genetic identity is completely masked. Mind-blowing, right?
Let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, Polygenic Inheritance and the bell curve, looking at the full spectrum of human traits.
So Mendel, he studied binary traits. His P's were strictly yellow or green, tall or short. No in-between whatsoever. But human traits? We don't really exist as simple binaries. I mean, we aren't just exactly 5 feet tall or exactly 6 feet tall, right? Traits like height, skin color, and even intelligence exist on this beautifully fluid, continuous spectrum. And we can thank polygenic inheritance for that. This just means these traits aren't controlled by one single gene, but by hundreds of different genes all working together at the exact same time. Every single gene adds just a tiny cumulative effect, creating this highly interactive, incredibly dynamic network. And because there are so many moving parts, this kind of inheritance, it's never going to give you a simple 3-to-1 ratio.
In fact, because of all those hundreds of tiny cumulative effects, when you actually graph these polygenic traits across a population, you never see rigid, blocky categories. Instead, you get this massive continuous bell curve, or, as the statisticians call it, a normal distribution.
Which leads us to our final stop, Section 5, the environmental factor, because genetics is definitely not a closed system.
Up to this point, we've been inside the cell, but now we're expanding our scope entirely outside the human body. You see, all of these continuous polygenic traits we just talked about, they're heavily influenced by the external world. Things like your daily nutrition, your stress levels, and even your climate and physical surroundings literally interact with your genome to determine your final phenotype. It's a two-way street.
So what's the big takeaway from this explainer? It's that genetics is this highly interactive, incredibly dynamic network. It's not just rigid math on a chalkboard, and your DNA is absolutely not a strict blueprint. Honestly, it's much more like a rough draft. It is the starting point, not the finish line.
Now that we've completely broken the Punnett square and seen the complex molecular reality behind everything from pink flowers to human height, I want to leave you with this final question. What biological mechanism should we explore next? Drop your thoughts, stay curious, and as always, keep exploring. See you next time.